Hello, it looks like Emmy. Can you let me know if you can hear me?
Hello,
Hello, how are you?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm doing pretty well. All right, so we'll give people like another minute or two to pop on, then we'll get started. In the meantime, for those of you that are here now, when we start the Q&A, you'll either be able to unmute yourself and just speak and ask them if you're comfortable with that. If you're not comfortable and you don't want to unmute yourself and talk, that is also 100% fine. You can just put questions in the chat. So if you've never been on Zoom before, at the bottom of your screen, you should see a little chat bubble. And if you click that, that should open up a screen to the right, and you can type anything in there. So I will also pull questions out of there. So where is everyone from that's hanging out tonight?
अभी कोई और आया ही नहीं अभी तक।
Oh, you are in Florida. All right. So you're in a nice warm place. I'm in Pennsylvania. It's been raining all day, but the sun just started to come out like 5 minutes ago. Cool. Okay, so we are going to go ahead and get started because I know there are more people that signed up, but you never know what people's schedules are like and if they're actually going to come. So I like to start on time and we'll kind of catch them up if they jump in. So I'm just going to go over a few basic things and then I will turn it over to you to make sure that I answer all your questions. So I'm Amber Kane, and as you likely know, which is how you ended up here, so I teach 3 AP courses online. I teach AP 2D design, AP drawing, as well as AP art history. And I've been doing that for about 6 years. I taught it in person for a year before I transitioned to teaching online. I've been teaching art in general for 13 years. I'll tell you a little bit more about me if we have time or if you have questions that relate to that. Just a couple overviews of what we're doing tonight, just so that you know. The call is being recorded, so if people signed up that could not attend, so that they can get in the information before I send it out, your names will be blurred. If you choose to turn your camera on and want to show your face, that's fine. That will also be blurred out before that is shared with people. Also, it will somewhat depend on what we're talking about. If tonight's questions end up being really focused to those of you that are on the call, then I won't be sharing the recording, but I wanted to make sure you knew about that. And I already told you, and it looks like you're figuring it out. You can either just write questions in the chat, or you can also unmute yourself and we can have this be more of a conversation. We're going to go until about 5:40. My plan is to start and just answer any questions that you have for me. If there's some more time left after that, I will add some extra information in of things that I think you'll want to know and that you'll find helpful. And if there's a point where I don't get to all of the questions that you have tonight, I will also save them and then either make additional video responses or additional written responses for you. So thanks for coming and hanging out tonight. We do live calls like this a lot in all 3 of the AP classes. This is the platform that we use, but I don't normally actually open it up to people that are interested in the class. And I thought this would be a fun way for us to actually get to interact a little bit more instead of just emailing back and forth. So I'm going to turn it over to the 2 of you. So Emmy, am I saying your name correctly? If not, I am?
Yes.
Okay, and then we have Dania. Is that correct, or am I destroying that?
It's Daniel.
Daniel?
Yeah, it's
Awesome.
Dania.
Dania.
Yeah.
I love it. That's beautiful. All right. So what questions do you all have for me?
I was mainly wondering what a typical week of homework would look like for your AP art class. I know in your video, I think about the online classroom platform. It seemed like there were several like videos and assignments per week.
Yeah, that's a great question. So the way that it works, it is broken down, and this has kind of been adjusted over the years based on what students said was really helpful. And there's a little assignment posted on each day of the week. It is set up that you could follow and just do what is on each day of the week. You could look at all of it on Monday. That can be really flexible for you, but a lot of people found it to be helpful if it was broken down. And so each week, you'll have one thing that you're going to turn in. That might be something that you're working on in your sketchbook or kind of whatever format you use to brainstorm ideas. So maybe you do it digitally, maybe you take photos. That highly varies and is totally fine. Or it might be a finished piece that you're turning in. What you will also have access to every week is, as you noticed in that video, there are always quite a few videos, and then there are some optional assignments. And the reason for that is because everyone comes into this class with different backgrounds of what they already know really well and what they need help with, as well as different things of what you're more interested in. So the video content, a lot of that is for you to kind of pick and choose of, oh, like I'm super interested in watercolor and trying to get better at that. So you might spend more time watching the video about watercolor, where someone else might be like, I've never even heard of color theory before, so I'm going to spend more time on that. So it's kind of built to be somewhat flexible to align with your interest and your needs. And then I also, throughout the course, as I get to know you better and look at your work, I might give you other resources as well based on what you're interested in. Good question. Dania, did you have one? Go ahead. Or maybe not. There you go.
I wanted to ask that, like for doing oil painting, what are the resources that you need, like which is easily available?
Okay. So if you were doing oil painting, I don't have it all memorized off the top of my head. So all of those things I pull lists for you. Some of it depends on what you have access to. The main thing to keep in mind with oil paints is if you're also using, a lot of times people are using like mineral spirits or turpentine to actually clean their brushes, because oil paints can't be cleaned with water. And so you need to work in a really well ventilated area. So normally students that are interested in oil paints, I have a whole list of resources that I give you that you can look at and think about what you have access to, what actually fits within your budget, and how you want to make that work. Have you ever done oil painting before, or is that just something that you're interested in?
I've never did it, but I'm interested in it. And I have to do my O-levels portfolio thing, so I just needed to like go over it.
Okay, so have you done a lot of work with acrylic paint before?
I have just did with watercolors right now because it's my second year of O-levels.
Okay. So one thing I might recommend is just acrylic paint tends to be a little bit more forgiving than oil paint does, and it can be a good building block transitional piece. And it is highly different from working in watercolor. That what you might want to do is work on transitioning some from watercolor either into using gouache, which is a more opaque type of watercolor, or into using acrylic, and get a little bit more comfortable with that, and then move into oil. Oil is kind of like normally the most challenging and least forgiving type of paint to use, so it should be kind of like at the end as you work your way up that ladder.
And I wanted to ask that, can we do oil painting and acrylic on any kind of paper, or it's just for canvas?
Good question. So Technically, you could do it on any kind of paper, but what you will find is paper that is like really lightweight, so really thin paper. If you were thinking about like printer paper, something like that, normally you're going to find that the paper tends to kind of like buckle and warp, as well as if you add especially with acrylic paint, if you're adding much water to your acrylic paint, it may actually rip holes in the paper. So technically you can use any paper. But if we're really thinking about the best practice, you can also just, what a lot of people will do is get a heavier weight paper, like paper that's at least like 90 pounds. And then they will buy gesso and paint the whole surface in gesso. And so what gesso does, it's white. When you add it onto the surface, it helps make so the paint doesn't soak into the paper. So that can be a cheaper alternative to canvas. You can also look at like canvas boards versus stretch canvas, or you can also buy something called canvas paper. So there are some options. So you don't have to use canvas for sure, but I would definitely recommend, or like a mixed media paper is something that you could look for.
I have a question just about how the live calls work, like how many people are there? Is everybody on camera? And then like what we're talking about.
Yeah, perfect. So I will say they're this exact format. So we use Zoom, we hop on here. As far as how many people are on, I would say I found that varies so much from year to year. Some of it is like, for example, this year, there are a lot of students that are outside of the US, and so time zones are complicated. So they can't all come as much. And sometimes it just varies from week to week, even like kind of right before everyone started staying home because of the virus, people's schedules are really crazy in my one class. And so we just started experimenting and doing a different day and a different time every week so that like some people can pop in. I normally try and keep the calls like pretty informal. So sort of like this, if there's something that I can tell the majority of the class is struggling with, then we'll do a lesson that's really specific around that together to try and work through that. Sometimes we will look at each other's work and give each other feedback on the work. Sometimes we'll be kind of like talking about what they're going into next week. It tends to really be, I try and be really responsive. So they are like, at this point, there's no set schedule for what we're going to talk about next year, because I like it to be a lot more where we can kind of show up, talk about whatever people want to talk about. So students can submit things that they want to make sure we talk about before our class call, or they show up and I might I always have some kind of plan in mind, but if we start a call and students are just like, this is what I really need help with, I will just ignore my whole plan and focus on that, because that's really the goal of these calls. While I give a lot of written feedback throughout the week and things like that, is a time, it's just easier when we can actually talk back and forth. As far as how many people show up on video, I leave that up to everyone. Some people are really comfortable with it and like to show up, and for other people that makes them really uncomfortable, or I've had students before that they're like hunkered down in the back of a library or something, and so it just doesn't work. So that all tends to really be up to everybody. But it does tend to be a time where people interact. Students also interact a lot with each other within like Google Classroom. So our main stream is really, everyone can post, obviously they can post their artwork and what they're working on for class, but students post things that they're working on for other things, or just things that they're excited about. I try and leave that as a place as well for you all to connect as much or as little as you want to. But I know that there are definitely students that are like, I just want some other people that are really into art too, that I can talk to and brainstorm with. So that's kind of kind of how the calls tend to roll. And then if we ever need to, normally we only need one a week, but if people really need help, then we just pop on and do one at another time.
That sounds really nice. Are we submitting like stages or progress throughout the week?
So that is one of those things that is always optional. Well, I shouldn't say always. Let me clarify. So sometimes if we're doing like a main project, like heading to a finished piece, and we're doing that over several weeks, then each week you would be submitting some progress images like leading up to that finished piece. If you just have like a finished piece that's due in a week, I leave it up to you how much you're submitting progress pieces and looking for feedback throughout the week. And part of the reason I do that is just trying to understand and be flexible to people's schedules and people's personality. So some people, that is really important to them, and you know, they really spread their work out through the week, and so that's actually helpful. Some people do like their whole assignment the day that it's due. And that's also fine. If that works for you, that's not my style, but it's some people's style. It would stress me out. But so that's one of those things that in the main Google Classroom stream, you can always say like, hey, this is what I'm working on. I'm feeling really stuck on this part, or I really need feedback on this. And ask for help there, but I don't require that you're doing that throughout the week. I've found whenever I really have people handing in more than one thing a week, that tends to get like confusing and overwhelming. So we stick to just one. So you get a link to Google Classroom once you actually are registered for the class. So I can't send that out right now. Any other questions for me?
I guess one question would be how grading works, like apart from the AP exam.
Yeah, you're full of good questions. I feel like you prepared for this. No, all right, I like it. So there are a couple different ways, and it ranges on the assignments. For assignments that are like really, some assignments are just you get a grade because you completed it. So those ahead of time, you'll always see within Google Classroom the name of the assignment, when it's due, and how many points it's worth. And so that's just like you get it done, you get the points. A lot of other assignments, you will have a rubric, and the rubrics vary. They are all based off of different parts of what the College Board is going to be looking for. And you always have the rubric when you're starting the project. So you can see exactly what you're being graded on. So you could also ask if there's any part that you're like, I don't even know what you're talking about. And so each time you submit an assignment, you will be putting it in the Google Doc that we use, and that has your rubric. It also normally has a couple questions for you to tell me there are some writing components from the College Board, so we work on them as you go, so you're not trying to do it all at once. So that will be in it. And then I normally ask you, like, is there something that you really want specific feedback on? That just helps me to know maybe you're really struggling with something and you want me to answer it, so I can make sure to address that while I'm giving you other types of feedback. And then you also look at the rubric and you score yourself. So part of the reason I have you do that is because if you're filling out the rubric and thinking, they're normally on like lots of different categories on a 5-point scale. If you're giving yourself a bunch of 2s, that's when I would also be encouraging you to reach out and be like, I think I need help. I think there's something that I'm not understanding. And then I go back in and also grade. So I'm either agreeing with you or disagreeing with you, and send that back to you. So you should always know what you are actually being graded on before you're graded on it. And there tends to be a decent amount of assignments. So my goal on the number of assignments and the point value is that even if you just did really poorly on an assignment, that it's never going to just totally like tank your grade, because I don't think that's helpful for anyone. So that's kind of how we do grades in the class.
Thank you. That makes sense.
Yeah, you're welcome. And I don't require you to submit to the College Board. So some people take the class and they never submit to the College Board because that's not their, that's not their goal. So that's also something that you can always decide whether that's important to you or not. And then, because this varies from teacher to teacher, I also don't factor whatever grade that you get from the College Board. I don't go in and like change your grade. So normally my grades for you would be done like mid-May, and you often find out from the College Board what score you get like late July, August. And so some people will take that and then go change your other grade. I don't do that. I just feel like it should be we're done when we're done. And I think the College Board score is valid, but it's also still different from what we're working on.
I have heard from many people in Pakistan especially that to get good grades in arts, it's very difficult. So what would you suggest?
Oh, do you mean like to get good grades like at a U.S. college in art? Is that what you mean?
No, I mean that to pass an O-level exam of art exam.
To pass the AP Art exam, then it's really hard? I honestly haven't found that to be the case for my students. I would say that I've been teaching online for 6 years. I've been teaching AP for 7 years. That all of the students that have done all of the assignments and actually applied the feedback that I've given them have done totally fine. The only people that don't do well are people that just haven't actually done like half of their assignments, or don't take any of the feedback that I give them. And sometimes that's a fine choice of like, they really love the work that they're making and they don't want to change no matter kind of what guidance I give. And so that's a choice they have to make. And then we do sometimes see that reflecting in the AP score. But other than that, I wouldn't say that I've had students find it incredibly difficult to score well as long as they're actually putting the time in and doing the assignments and taking the feedback. So I hope that answers your question. It's kind of a hard question to give like a concrete answer to. So feel free to throw follow-up questions at me if that's challenging. Okay, Emmy says, I've heard that getting a 4 or 5 on AP Art is very rare too, but it seems like your class is set up to make it possible. So I would say 4 is not as much. Like 5s are definitely more rare. Another thing that in all complete honesty and transparency that we're all kind of waiting to find out. So this year, the College Board completely changed the requirements for the AP 2D design, AP drawing, and AP 3D design courses. In my personal opinion, I think the changes are fabulous and are much better for the students. All of that is to say, because the format is completely new, it's a little bit harder to tell is this going to make it easier to get 5s? Is it going to make it harder to get 5s? That is really a part that we're still finding out a little bit. And they actually just also changed the requirements specific to just this year because of so many schools closing because of the coronavirus. Students that are submitting this year are going to be submitting less work than you all would be submitting in coming years. So I think that's also going to kind of throw things into a weird situation. In my opinion right now, from looking at the examples they've given us, going to the training from the College Board, and looking at their current rubric, I personally think that it's going to be easier for students to get 4s or 5s. So in the past, it was highly, highly focused on your technical skill. And while that still is important, it's really shifted to a big focus on your process and your thinking and your problem solving, which is actually that's my favorite thing about art. So I think there's more room for experimentation and more room for students to show their personal voice and style. But like I said, to be completely honest, this exact format that we're going through right now is brand new this year. So I know how my students have done in the past, but we're in a little bit of a whole new world at this exact moment. Anything else I can answer for you all?
Okay, so you're talking about the changes with the coronavirus and everything. So I had this question. So I was reading the syllabus a while ago, and I know they were saying that the College Board was saying what you would usually submit. I think now they're not having you submit in person or physically. It has to be a certain size. But then I know in one of your videos you were saying that you would encourage your students to work larger, at least for some of their pieces. So what, for size, what would you usually recommend?
I love it. You did a lot of research. So what you're talking about is when we're not in the coronavirus world, they have you send in 5 pieces, and they have you send those in physically. And you can't mail anything bigger than 18 by 24. So that's where that one size requirement comes from. I still, and with sizes, I'll kind of try and push you in different directions. And then it's up to you if you want to do it. And also if it actually works for, wherever you're making art. I vaguely keep the 18 by 24 size in the back of my head, but never really use it as a driving force. So if your style or an idea you have really is going to be stronger on a larger scale, then that's where I'm going to encourage you to go. The other thing that the College Board does, which is new with this new format. So if you just got really excited and you made a 5 foot by 6 foot painting, and it was just spectacular. So those 5 pieces are supposed to be this is my best work. Then they have made it so that you could take a photograph of that and you could print the photo and send that in. That's not my number one go-to solution, because understanding the real idea behind sending those physical pieces in is so that they can really see what do your brush strokes look like, or what do your pen marks look like? There's a difference of seeing work in person. But I try to never really have that being our driving force. Now, obviously we would have to have a conversation, and I've never actually had a student like this. So now that I say this, it probably will happen. If you are I always make giant work, then we might have to have a conversation about making some pieces that are smaller than 18 by 24. But we definitely have never had that happen. So that's kind of where we go with that. If we try and keep it in the back of our minds every once in a while, but not have that as a leading force in what people are making.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'm generally don't make things that are big.
Okay. Yeah. Most people I find stick to kind of 11 by 14 or smaller. Not many students are going for super big work. And really, other than the physical pieces, the only way they know the size of the work is when you submit the digital images, you type in what the size of the piece is. But sometimes the reason I'll encourage that is it's another way to show to them that you can work in multiple ways. It most definitely is different making a 3 by 5 drawing, a 3 by 5 inch drawing versus a 3 by 5 inch painting. that changes the way that we work. And so it kind of shows like you're good at several things. We have about 10 more minutes. Anything else I can answer for either of you?
I don't have any questions right now, at least.
Okay.
So, I wanted to ask that I have chosen facial expressions for my like O-level portfolio topic. So I wanted to ask how the scope is like for facial expressions, and how much deep I can get into this work in just 1 year time.
Okay, so you're breaking up a little bit, so I'm going to try and summarize what I think you said, because I want to make sure to answer the right question. Is that you're telling me you picked facial expressions for some work that you're working on, and you want to know how you can explore that more? Is that generally what you were asking?
Yes, I am.
Cool. So I would say, and I would really say this is like overarching to anytime you're trying to get a little bit deeper in your work. So our brain naturally will come up with more ideas if we turn things into questions instead of statements. So a great place to start is, instead of saying, I'm going to explore facial expressions in art, could be just doing a quick flipping that into a question and asking yourself, what do facial expressions look like in art? And then continuing to flow and see if you can get like 15 or 20 questions off of that. So other ideas might be, why do we use facial expressions? What do facial expressions mean? Is there a way to show facial expressions without showing a face? How does color connect to conveying the actual expression or kind of confusing the expression? So an example of that would be if you were drawing me smiling and also used happy colors like yellows and oranges and like purples, that would align. The colors would make sense with my expression. Versus if you tried to get a little bit more playful with that, and I was smiling, but you started to think about what are kind of like sneaky or mischievous colors that you could put in there, that would start to say, oh, like maybe she's smiling because she knows a secret that I don't know, is where I would recommend that you start, as just kind of like dumping a bunch of questions on a page, and then starting to explore in your sketchbook or however you kind of like to come up with ideas of what do potential answers for those questions actually look like. Another fun thing could be seeing, like, challenging yourself of getting your camera out and just setting it for like 10 minutes or giving yourself a period of time and seeing how many different facial expressions you can make, and then going back through those images and thinking about, if you had to name them, you could even ask other people. If they had to name what expression are you making, what would people say, and then see how that might guide or dictate some of your work. Another way of grabbing people's facial expressions, so obviously I do a lot of video chats like this and have been told I'm very expressive. So people are always sending me like screenshots of crazy faces that I'm making while I'm in the middle of videos, which could also be kind of entertaining for you. If you're watching a movie or watching a TV show or on something like this, you can take the recording of this and see how many crazy facial expressions I made tonight, and just kind of start to pull those out and think about, what are we learning? If there was no sound to this video and you were just watching my expressions, obviously my hands tend to be pretty expressive as well. What is that telling you? Is that helpful?
Yeah, it is. Thank you.
You're welcome. So we just have a couple more minutes left. Any other questions that popped into anybody's head?
I just wanted to show you some like the first artwork that I did with the like eyes. So
Mhm. Do you know how to share your screen?
yeah, I know.
Cool.
It's like this.
That looks big. Yes.
Yeah, it is.
Can you tell me a little bit more about what you're trying to show in this piece?
Basically, I'm trying to show that this girl is hidden behind the wall. It's not completed yet. I have to color the wall also. So this girl is hidden behind a wall, and she's trying to sneak that what is happening around. And basically, I got this idea from Pinterest. I was going through the images, so I just saw that, and I thought that this would be nice work.
Okay, so let me give you, we've got 4 minutes. So I'm going to try and give you 3 quick ideas. So one, and I think this can be helpful for everyone. So Pinterest is an awesome place to get some basic ideas from, and then think about how you can take those ideas and then like take some of your own reference photos so that it becomes a little bit more your own work. Two, since you are working on portraits right now, if you don't already know about this, a really helpful thing, and I think it's always easier just to start with your own face, is to start to measure your own proportions. We all follow generally the same proportions, but to start to measure your own, and then use that same concept to translate into your drawing. So you can grab like a strip of paper, and if I measured my eye, then normally about one of my eyes will fit in between my the two, and then I have my next eye. So if you were doing that in a drawing and you were starting with drawing one eye, you can use that to help do measurements to make sure everything else is in proportion. So I could continue to take this like little piece of paper that I know is my eye, and now I know like my nose is about that same width, so then I could go and draw my nose. I could use the same thing and measure like how many eyes is my forehead? It's like 1.5. You can measure the length of your face because we tend to make our eyes a little bit too big, and then we make our forehead too small. That's just like a natural thing that everyone does when they're drawing. So it can be really helpful to start to do those measurements, and that'll help you with your proportions. And then the last one, and this is something that we talk about a lot in the AP class because I found it something not many students are very familiar with, which is fine, and it's a more advanced thing to work through, is really thinking about the composition and how that composition also would make the viewer feel. So some of what I heard you saying was about her like hiding behind a wall. And so some of what we want to think about when we're thinking about where things go on the page is how we also continue to have that feeling. So if she's lower on the page, it might make the viewer feel like they're looking down over a wall at her, or like just really hidden in the corner so that most of the page is actually empty and then we just have this little piece. That's going to make us feel more and more like someone is hiding. So we naturally tend to put things in the center of the page. That's just like our go-to. And then when you start to think about moving things to other parts of the page, that's where you start to really come up with complex compositions, which is obviously something I can't teach in the like 30 seconds we have left. But hopefully those are helpful ideas. So before we get kicked off, thank you both for hanging out tonight and coming prepared with such great questions. And as I said, if you think of more questions or other things you want to know, feel free to just respond to emails that send you this link and I will answer them for you. Have a fabulous evening. Bye, guys.
Thank you so much. Bye.
Thank you. Bye. Well, it's my nighttime.
Oh, well then good night to you. Bye.